And we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another broadcast from the Geek Book Club podcast, What Reads Books for Geeks. Once a month, we pick a book, we read it, we get to talk about it online on the internet. You can join the conversation when we record live, or just send us your comments after the show's been recorded. You can hit us up on the Twitter, through email, through all that fun internet traffic. Every month, I am, of course, joined by my lovely co-host, Mr. Andrew Wallace, at Fat Produce on Twitter. How's it going, buddy?
Going pretty good. Juan, how about yourself?
Well, I'm fine. I don't even think we need to talk much about me because if you're watching this live, you can see we've got a fantastic collection of gentlemen to discuss. I feel what's going to be one of the biggest cultural forces in geek fandom and nostalgia of the year. And that, of course, we are celebrating Ready Player One with Warren Bowman from BW1. Warren, how's it going, man?
Good, man. Getting excited. Talking about Ready Player One. I've been waiting for a little while here. I got a little personal involvement with Ready Player One, some family involvement. So pretty excited for it.
Excellent. And of course, I mean, from our discussions on Altered Carbon, we also have returning Mr. Enabong Etta from Board at Work. How's it going, E?
I am excited. I also just saw the movie, but we're not talking about that. I was going to
tease that. I didn't know if you wanted me to say, because we're not going to talk much about the movie. I mean, I think we all have thoughts on the state of adaptations, but you've actually seen it, so now I have to swear you to silence regarding.
Oh yeah, sure. I will say, join me on board afterwards. I will be not alive. I'll have my review up there. It's a non-spoiler review on board, so don't worry about it. Done.
And of course, we got Big Daddy Lou in the house, also joining us to chat up again. A massive force of cultural geekery. How's it going, Lou?
How you guys doing?
I'm doing. Yes. I already established, Lou, that I wasn't gonna talk about myself in this intro because I'm just excited to have such an awesome group of guys to chat this out with. Of course, Ready Player One, the 2011 novel from Ernest Cline. And again, I keep pointing to this as a cultural force. This is the celebration of, I feel like, 80s and 90s kids' childhoods in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi futuristic setting, which again is sort of a celebration of 80s and 90s kids' childhoods with a classic adventure hero story that all culminates in a climactic showdown between amazing forces of good and evil in exactly the way that our sort of nerdy geek culture of Dungeons and Dragons and early Nintendo video games would hope to aspire to. I just want to kick this off. For reading the book, who of us here were rereading it versus reading it for the first time? Andrew, I'm pretty sure this is the first time you've picked up the book.
Yep, this is my first time picking it up. It's been on my list for a long time, and I'm just glad that I finally got the chance to have a big reason to have us read it.
Good. Again, it's like I didn't want it to feel like homework because I really did enjoy this novel. And Enabong, did you do the audiobook for this, or?
I did the audiobook twice. I just listened to it again last month. Okay. It actually took me roughly 20 days. It was right after we did Expanse.
Yes.
Yeah, I was reading another novel, then I jumped over and started listening to Ready Player One again, and it was fantastic all over again the second time.
Excellent. And Warren, you said you had a personal connection to Ready Player One.
Well, I guess not personal. It's a family connection. I have someone that's in the movie. Relative of mine.
Awesome, that's excellent.
That's actually in it. Not a big role, but he'll be prominently in certain scenes. We'll be able to see him in. I listened to the book about the time escapes. I'm trying to remember. It was maybe about a couple months ago. Again, kind of skimming through and sort of trying to catch up on, not catch up, but trying to remember some of the key sort of plots and stuff like that from it. So it's pretty familiar to me. I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook the first time and enjoyed it again, kind of going through it a second time as well.
And Lou, did you actually pick up a book for this? Am I the only one who picked up a book, or did everyone else do the audio? Oh, Andrew, you've got the book too. Okay, I thought.
Oh yeah.
I thought you sounded Lou,
Look,
did you listen?
this device is my book.
Okay.
I don't do physical copies. I do audiobooks. And this is the first one I've actually completed.
Okay.
And
That's a good omen for the discussion we're going to have.
I finished it literally in 7 days.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
I went back to the book and I
mapped
plowed
it.
through it so fast that I'm actually having trouble remembering stuff from it again. Like I put the book down about 2 weeks ago from having said that we were going to talk about this book. So I'm even having to go back up to the wiki and pull info back out on it.
To be fair, I did have the physical book. I got it from Loot Crate. When Loot Crate first started, they sent me a crate with a book. I never read it. I gave it to a friend of mine, and it was only until Sam read it, and Sam was like, "You need to read this book." So I got the audiobook.
See,
I read when you can listen.
My Loot Crate reading example was Attack on Titan, when they had the actual manga in Attack on Titan. So again, like, good job, Loot Crate, keeping people well read. That's excellent.
I just straight listened to it on
Thank you.
2x speed, I believe, actually. So I went through both times. I tend to like speed up a little bit. That's what makes it go a little bit faster for me. But I think I caught on and kept most of what goes on. It's a pretty dense book, though, with a lot of stuff in it. Some of it is kind of fillerish, but there is a lot in there.
Oh yeah.
Well, and actually, I think that kicks me right into the first part of this conversation. The audiobook is narrated by Will Wheaton, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And he's in it, which is funny.
Yeah,
he's in it.
So I guess the first thing I would ask is that self-awareness distracting at all, or do you guys feel that Will Wheaton did a good job of keeping those worlds, our real world and his involvement in geek culture, separate from what the book is trying to accomplish, because of how dense and self-referential the book already is? You know, because that's like 3 layers of meta right there, to have a book which is already nostalgic, making appeals to your memory of classic video games and movies, read by someone who was a part of that, who also references himself as a part of that culture throughout the book.
I think Will is Parzival. That's just it. I mean, that's how I took it when I listened to the book. He is narrating the character, so there is no break of reality into a third or fourth world to say. I guess for me, anyway, it was I just enjoyed the way Will was able to enunciate, describe, and express other characters within the book as well. Because with audiobooks, that's always the biggest thing, is, at least for me, is can you actually just move away from the main protagonist and describe other characters well enough that I get involved with it. So
he becomes sort of a totem for the character that he's narrating. Like,
yeah, exactly. But I think maybe the one thing maybe you guys would probably point to this is that the reason I enjoyed it was because if you want to say, is there an outer experience or fourth wall experience, the fourth wall experience for me would be the fact that it was Will Wheaton, who is basically my generation, and someone, not necessarily because he's part of sci-fi lore, but he is part of just my generation, or part of that era, is the same person who is telling the story about somebody in the future, you know, experiencing my era.
And so for
that was my own connection.
Did you have like Wesley Crusher in mind when you were mentally running this kid through his adventure?
Nope.
Well, Lou is very concise, and I appreciate that. This is the last thing that I want to bring up before we actually start getting into the actual book and the plot and the summary and all that fun stuff. This was a really fun share with members of my family. I was heavily influenced in movies and music by my aunt and uncle. Just all kinds of phenomenal like music learning experiences. They would pass me books. They would talk to me about movies. And then they also had sort of a love of kitsch too. So like the first person who ever recommended that I watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was my Uncle Bob. You know, like he loves that kind of expression in filmmaking, and especially stuff that's sort of frivolous and fun. So about a week ago, and I think in part because of this podcast, my grandmother posts on Facebook, "I have never been a gamer, but now I feel that I have had a crash course on gaming. My mind is in a whirlwind of 1980s references. Really enjoyed reading the novel Ready Player One. Can't wait to see the movie, which will be out later this month. We already all have our tickets." So I mean, it's great. Like this book has very quickly become sort of like a shorthand guide to top picks in culture from 30 years ago. It's an amazing expression of that era, especially those of us who grew up in it, from the earliest sort of arcade games to home Nintendo style consoles, John Hughes movies, Rush soundtracks, and being able to put all that together. Now we can look back on that and we can share it and I think Ready Player One does a really good job of being a time capsule for all of that. And later on in this discussion, I do want to get into some of the backlash surrounding this book too, because of its focus on nostalgia, and of course because of where society's currently at, and no one's allowed to ever have any fun. Let's get into some of the description. Andrew, if you want to just kind of walk us through the intro of the plot, because I think this is going to be one of the things that while we're talking about the book today, later we will be talking about in a different broadcast entirely. We're going to be talking about the adaptation, just like we did with Altered Carbon, and that's kind of where I like to kind of focus. Part of the discussion right now is, what is this book about? Who are these characters? And what does the story lead us through?
Well, the book starts out, so it's a dystopian future of 2044. And essentially, just to set up the world, we are out of fossil fuels, and we are in the midst of an energy crisis that's been going on for about, 20, 30 years, something around that time. And so populations are mainly in cities. There's rampant poverty. And what was developed by, it starts with an H. The
Holiday.
Holiday. Thank you. He ended up creating the Oasis, which is basically the ultimate expression of what I feel like we would think the combination of the internet and virtual reality, what we would ultimately want it to become. And it's been so pervasive in life that most people in the world live their lives through it and ignore the awfulness of their reality. So setting that up, we come up with the main character of Wade, who is living in Oklahoma, who's in the stacks, which is basically, as you can tell if you've looked at any of the covers, it's a bunch of
stacks of like trailers.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just destitute and cannot, he's just basically being able to taste the Oasis. Because of his situation, and just dream about Halliday, because Halliday at the beginning of the book dies and has this video that he had set up beforehand, basically saying that he has left an Easter egg in the Oasis for someone to find, and what if someone finds it who is worthy, he'll inherit all of his fortune and complete control of the Oasis.
Because I've got a golden ticket.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. The 21st century Willy Wonka, as it were. So we go through, and he ends up.
Well, I think that's
things
enough
happen.
to start.
I'll put it that way.
And everyone lives happily ever after. Thank you. And we'll be back next month with Master and Commander, Far Side of the World. So I mean, I think that's actually a good place just to kind of change into some of the discussion of this book. Picking this book back up the second time, I will admit that I don't feel the story lives up to the novelty of the first experience of reading it. That this isn't a book that I still enjoyed it. I still had fun with this novel, but there's a cotton candy entertainment aspect to the core story for me which this book isn't going to be something that I feel I'm going to revisit on sort of a regular basis.
Can you explain? Because I'm having a very different opinion from you.
No,
now.
And I can totally sort of understand why many people will definitely feel differently than me. But the core of the story is focused so much on a celebration of this author's era of childhood that I feel there are some elements over the course of the adventure which don't quite live up to the circumstances of the characters at the very beginning. We've had a lot of people pointing to books like this, or this book specifically, as being something of like inspiration for our current trends into AR and VR. But we've existed with a cyberspace, alternate reality, virtual reality since William Gibson. I mean, at least in a cyberpunk way that I think you would inspire actual engineers to try and create some of this stuff. So this book doesn't necessarily blaze the trail there that I think a lot of people are sort of bestowing this novel with that kind of inspiration. And at the same time, the adventure story does feel a little cribbed from 80s and 90s movies. You know, sort of the kid from the trailer park who plays a video game and discovers a world larger than himself and rises to the occasion to become a hero is... Did I just describe Ready Player One, or did I just describe The Last Starfighter?
I mean, true. Exact. I think the one main thing the book does very well, it shows the grind, and there's a lot of grinding in this, and I think that was for me one of the things that separates it from everything else, because with novels in the past, which I've never read because I don't read that many books that describe these kind of worlds. Didn't talk about the grind. The grind, I think, was not there in this sense, which is why a lot of people point to this is the book that will spearhead AR and VR and all that kind of stuff, because the intricacies of going into, I think that was for me one of the biggest parts. It reminded me of, you know, a lot of the things they talked about in the book, the game, like Joust, for instance. Right. I'd never heard of Joust in my life until this, but I understood it because there was the grind into.
Oh, totally.
Playing that too. That was the part there.
No, I completely agree there, where the book's trappings and the references that are being made to the book are wonderfully executed. You know, we've had these kind of criticisms on previous podcasts. Like, there are authors who can describe action and immerse you in the behavior of the characters, and there are some authors who like will avoid trying to write action or combat or something like that. They, you know, in the same way that a film director, you know, like a Christopher Nolan is an amazing visual storyteller until you need to execute a fight scene. Then he's not the best.
That's true.
You know, he's not bad, but he's not the best. And that to me, like, there's so many of those moments that I feel are so wonderfully done that I think it's easy to enjoy the book on that surface, on that level, and never feel like you're really missing anything by digging deeper. It was one of the things that I was really trying to revisit in the second reading is the trappings of this world. I mean, look at some of the discussions that I wouldn't expect Ernest Cline to really get into in 2011, to really get into some of the politics and the market that we currently live in today. But we have this world which is facing this severe energy crisis, lack of fossil fuels. He's not really making a political statement in any way, which I respect. The book is focused on the fantasy and the adventure, but we're also describing a society which is hinged exclusively on this very high-end, graphics intense, interactive, immersive style of multimedia. And just look at, like, you know, the trouble that we have with crypto mining today. You know, they're estimating that Bitcoin by itself is using as much energy as a small country when spread out across the world. How do, you know, I feel that there was a missed opportunity to address some more of the world, but obviously the focus of this book is the escapism, is the traveling to another wonderful magical place. But I mean, like, how do you keep the lights on in that wonderful magical place.
Or how
Was
do
a
you keep
topic that I
fed?
think could have.
Yeah,
or
see,
died
I
explosion.
would say I would have to disagree because again, I think because of how dense, and you guys can talk about this, how dense the grind, all these different, even the Oasis itself, the way he explained that. If he went and he started explaining or even getting more into the outside world itself, other than the few times when he mentioned solar panels were used for almost everything, it was pretty that, right? I think that's where you move into that. Why the hell am I in this place? I really want to go back. And I almost feel like that's what he wanted us to feel like. We just wanted to be in the Oasis as opposed to anywhere else. Because I think one of the subtle ways of doing that was, I guess we can talk about parts of the book now, right? Can we?
Oh, yeah, of course.
All right.
We just like to save, more of the spoiler territory towards the end of the podcast, so people know when
his apartment. The fact that he didn't, he was in his apartment. The way he described the apartment to me felt like I wanted to be in the Oasis. Like, forget the apartment. I just didn't want to be in the apartment, or or even the stacks themselves. I just want to be out of that and go to H's basement and just chill, So I think that was probably the direction more than anything else. Maybe a sequel, who knows?
Well, and because Lou, and especially from
book sequel, I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're working
we
on
can
one
totally
apparently,
write,
I don't know how that's
Ready Player 2?
Why not? The title writes itself. No, but especially Lou, with you kind of giving it a chuckle there. When we're kind of looking at that style of world building, I think there's a part of a lot of the people who are fans of this book. I think there's a big relief that we get through the introduction of this story, and the story never does become that commentary that our parents' generation would have had about us playing games. Like, oh, well, you're doing all of this escapism out in the Oasis, but really it was all about your friends who were with you in the real world all along. Like we don't have to be coddled or condescended to that degree.
No, our parents were also wrong about video games, so
right.
They were dead wrong on that one.
We did a whole episode on esports with Newegg, and we had the director of the esports program at UC Irvine come down, and you're like, the facility that they're working on at the collegiate level is utterly mind-boggling. You just want I want to go back in time to talk to me, and it's like, no, keep playing games and get real good.
Yeah, I kind of wish I would have done that.
Right? Again, a missed opportunity.
Hey,
see, my brothers. Well, I'm gonna say my middle brother. He played more of the video games throughout his whole life. Even to this day, that man eats, breathes video games. He gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes home, eats a little bit, is on that damn PlayStation for about 5 hours, if not longer, sleeps a little bit, back to work, comes home, and is on one of these damn games. He's been like that ever since he was born. He only took time out to play sports when my stepfather forced him to go play baseball. That was it. On the other hand, I didn't play the video games like that. I played occasionally, but it was more hanging out in the streets with the friends playing sports.
So I mean, none of these references did anything for you then. You were just like, eh.
As far as memory-wise, yes, because, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So that's what brought me back to the funness. Not sitting in front of a TV playing games for hours. I mean, I did that once, and it cost me a relationship.
Well, Trisha and I were joking about it after the esports segment too, just saying like, if one of our kids, she has a son, I have a daughter, if they come to us and be like, hey, we want to get into competitive gaming, and be like, well, like the worst injury you're going to face is, sedentary lifestyle. So you'll have to work on your health and fitness, and you might get like wrist carpal tunnel RSI injuries, but you won't have to like get a concussion from, heading a ball in soccer, or, getting roughed up in football or something like that. So yeah, we're fine with esports. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So, Warren, with you revisiting the book too, How do you feel the creation of this world has aged from when the author started creating this? As I mean, because I completely agree with E. I do believe that there is an effort, a concerted effort from Ernst Cline to make the real world feel exhausting and to make the fantasy world feel vibrant and entertaining. But you know, we're exploring concepts like AR and VR in the consumer space today. You know, it's always the fun thing of science fiction. How predictive, how right did he get it? And especially coming back to read the book a second time, getting to kind of delve into maybe a little bit more critique. What do you feel the world of 2044 resembles in this novel as compared to where we are today?
So I took the Oasis to me. I understand it's AR and the VR thing, but the first thing I thought about it when he described it, I said, "Oh, this is the holodeck from Star Trek." Like that's the way I kind of felt that it was. I was more towards. But I think of the Oasis itself and the way to describe the world are related to if it was 2016 today. It's like it's just the internet. That's all it truthfully is. That you don't think of AR or VR. It's just us. It's just now in their world you can interact with the internet physically, or not physically, but in a more visual way. But that's essentially what it is. Because while it talks about gaming and that's its core, they go to school in the Oasis. They can get any amounts of information they want to get from the Oasis. And the key thing is that the Oasis is essentially a free service. It's something anyone can connect to and hook up with. So it's like this huge portal of information that's just sitting right there, available for anyone to grab onto that can hook up to it. So when I was reading the book and as I was listening to the book, and I just kept relating it to, this is just the internet. That's what this is. It's just the internet. It's how in 2044 we'll be able to, instead of right click, we just step forward. We move in this direction, that direction. Because our VR right now is so primitive compared to what that was talking about. Like, would that even be called VR if we got to that point? If you think about it, it's a combination of AR and VR and many other things that are just concepts right now. Because it's like a world that it's like the closest we have to that is the AR and VR concepts that we have today, and then that VR capturing technology that I believe I can't remember if it was NVIDIA or is it who created it? It just got announced.
Oh, NVIDIA. No, NVIDIA. Unreal Engine has a capture technique that basically mimics, can mimic human capture immediately onto
another avatar.
An avatar, like off the spot. It's one-to-one.
But that is we also going off of what Warren is saying, the VR and all that other crap. But we also had Google Glass that failed. That was the next best thing that you would tap on the screen. Because remember, in the book, they would talk through the VR like it was nothing.
Yeah, it was that. What Unreal has is the closest thing to what the Oasis actually is. So, to me, it's still like that's the internet for us right now. We're too primitive compared to whatever that.
There's definitely that feeling for me, because I'm rereading the book, and their description of their VR tech is like, the analogy I would make is the internet we have today versus like AOL, like dial-up. Would we even call them the same thing? Is that still the internet? And obviously no. The internet has become, but it happened over a period of time where in the era that we're in, that's the internet we've got. So that's what we're used to. That's what we use. And those changes evolve in ways where, from day to day, we don't notice those shifts, but try and go back to a gadget from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And
I don't even.
Well, you guys did that.
Right.
How'd that work out?
On smartphones and stuff, and it wasn't as successful as I thought it was going to be. But
I think even in the book, did they say virtual reality, or did they just kind of say virtual world? Like
they said virtual worlds. I mean, the virtual worlds is what they use mostly. Yeah. But I mean, like
he really didn't use AR or VR or anything like.
Well, in 2011, we weren't really talking about AR to any great degree.
Yeah.
I mean, there were
it existed, but it wasn't like it wasn't what it is today. Not like this, not like today, but it was around enough that I think he might have it was enough that he could have referenced it by concept in the book, but he bypassed that because whatever it still wouldn't have mattered because what they're doing in that book is completely different,
right?
To even begin with.
It's in the 2040s. By that point, terminologies will change and be imprinted in society, and lost, and then other terminology can come up between that time. So
I'm thinking now. Think Facebook rooms when you can go into the room and have the little VR puppet. That's probably the closest thing to the little pop-up stick figure things. It's like the closest thing we have to what anything new is.
I mean, it is, but sorry to bring in tech talk, but the predecessor to that was PlayStation Home. Remember the PS Home? Yep. If you guys remember that, PlayStation had a virtual world where you could just hang out. It wasn't VR, but it was a virtual. It was virtual.
But I know you're bringing PlayStation Home, but let's not forget that PlayStation Home was building off of Second Life.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. Yeah, okay. There we go.
I mean, if you want to take an OG, because I think you're right because what was PlayStation Home, but a much more polished up version of what was the raw, crazy Wild West of Second Life, where they were even trying to market their own economy. And there was an actual exchange rate to Second Life dollars versus currency long before crypto took off.
You also have if you look at the way the world is, the closest. Another thing I'm thinking about, the closest we have to that, and the way they interact with each other is how people played EverQuest and World of Warcraft, where they're that invested in the world in a way. Because this is a very Dungeons and Dragons element to this entire thing, which I never actually played too much of. That predates me a little bit.
I was a Vampire the Masquerade kid, so not pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons, but occasionally I'd throw down like a Giovanni or a Ventru, or I never played as a Nosferatu, but the Bruja were also kind of fun. So, anyone? No, just me.
No D&D for me.
But to that point,
I was a big D&D guy back in the day. But
one of the things that's kind of interesting. So this is a question in the live chat from Gansy Tech Nerd. How does a reader's visualization of the characters and the fictional world affect their perspective of the story as they read on, especially a book like Ready Player One? And that's one of the things that I think is actually interesting about Ernst Cline's approach to telling the story, is that's a part of the story, is we get so used to, if you're playing in a guild, even in my silly little phone game, Marvel Future Fight, one of my best buddies in that game, his avatar is Thanos. So if I ever meet him and he doesn't look like Thanos, I'm going to be very disappointed. That's his face to me. We have these great conversations as we're playing this game together. And that's only magnified, and that only manifests more directly when you're playing a much more interactive game like a World of Warcraft. You could have a very passionate, a very in-depth, tied, connected friendship, and never interact with the AFK version of that, human form ever. But that's still a meaningful relationship. So do we think in 25 years that this is going to be on the rails, the depiction of technology that we see in this book, and the way that we form relationships around avatars, and the way that we capture that information, and we can
absolutely. They were already doing that in Warcraft. They had weddings in Warcraft and EverQuest. They were already doing that. Ernest Cline's late on that one.
I mean, look, Juan, remember, it took us a while before we actually physically met.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so I mean, and we were I was like, this is my boy right here. I mean, done.
But the difference is that at least we've visually seen yourself through this technology called web chat and video chat.
Yeah,
these people are in the Oasis. They don't do that. No one physically sees the
but like
real
you said,
person.
But like you said, World of Warcraft players didn't even meet people or share information until a certain point, and they were considered friends. I mean, Sam was telling me about somebody who they had a World of Warcraft funeral because he went to Iraq, passed away. They found out, and everyone, like his guild, other guilds, basically paid homage to somebody who he'd never met at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's actually that's happened multiple times where they've had some sort of service. There was one about a decade ago, but that's on YouTube someplace where it was on a PvP server, and they had this, and the person who died was known for loving PvP, and so a rival guild came in and crashed it, and it looked like almost crashed the server.
Wow.
How rough would that be? Like like, oh, we're just gonna wreck this funeral. Don't mind us.
PvP.
But we're gonna frag because Fragger's gonna frag. Right. No, but also, I mean, also in the greater context. So I mean, like, think about what we're doing with VR today and where we think that this might expand. Again, extrapolating 25 years from now, if I could actually predict that kind of market trend or market force, I'd be a far richer man than I am today. But there was one of the things that in the second reading of this book, because they're describing a very, again, I want to say it's a very Matrixy or William Gibson-y style of alternate reality, which the corporeal form is very sedentary, but the vibrance of the interaction and the world and the expression and the adventure are so much fun that, I mean, isn't this more like a brain interaction than it would be like a haptic suit and goggles with gloves kind of interaction?
Well, for most people in this story, the way I viewed it, the world was most of the people couldn't afford to do any sort of haptic feedback, or except most people had the basics to be able to get into the Oasis. So
all rocking their Google Daydreams.
Right. Yeah, so most of it was in people's imagination. They were still using their imagination to go the extra step to put themselves fully in the world, as opposed to having the pretty kick-ass rig that Wade has. That whole chapter about him describing his virtual reality setup was like pretty much exactly how I've imagined our VR future with,
He was overboard, bro. I mean, seriously, his apartment went overboard. Reinforced steel with his cage.
I mean, he is Parzival. He is the first.
And then he was a super nerd.
Well, let's table that for just a second, because we should probably at least talk through the basics of what we're getting through here. So Wade, what is Wade Watts? Is his name?
Wade Watts, yeah.
He had a weird one.
He goes by the online moniker of Parzival, and again, kid from the stacks, trailer park, dystopian trailer park, where literally trailers are just stacked on top of each other, and everyone sort of has to coexist in this vertical slum ghetto style society. And he's going to school in an online fashion, just like Warren was mentioning. It doesn't make sense to try and bus kids to a physical brick and mortar building anymore. It's just you plug into your basic Chromebook VR headset and you go to school and you learn stuff. And then on his own time, he's involved in just like playing games online and hanging out with his friends and doing cool pop culture referencey things. But because the creator of the Oasis has hidden this Easter egg, this treasure hunt throughout his digital creation, which spans like galaxy wide. I mean, the online world that they have for the Oasis is
huge.
Is enormous, with literal planets that people can go to play in or explore or create for themselves. So he stumbles his way. Again, I kind of don't want to give up too much. Screw it. So he stumbles his way into unlocking one of the major parts of this mystery, of this treasure hunt, and it thrusts him into the limelight. He is now one of the internet's most recognized and well-known celebrities. He's akin to like a pop culture figure of his own right. He starts making a ton of real cash by endorsing products and being appearing on people's shows and in other people's media, and it instantly moves him
like a social media star. That's what he turned into, essentially into it. He turned into a big like the Logan Pauls of the world of that virtual world. That's what he turned
See,
into.
I would actually
Only for doing
disagree
something of
to that
substance.
extent.
Yeah, substance. No, I'm just saying but the massive amount of popularity he got just by doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, but
Clearing one stage.
I think what it was though is that he turned into a celebrity, not because the way the Oasis was treated was if you rose up like that, you're equal to a movie star. I mean, like it wasn't because right now we still treat it movie star. Then there's this, there's YouTube star, there's Instagram, there's all that kind of stuff. Then it was if you found the key, boom, you were the same as Tom Cruise.
I'm sorry, bro.
Yeah.
You're either a movie star or nothing else. I don't buy that. Instagram star, no.
We're talking about the Oasis, yeah.
7 seconds of fame for someone else.
Yeah, but I akin it more to that, like that when it was more to that. I did something fun on the internet by doing splits on a subway or something like that. You're famous now.
No, man, I get the logic. I'm just saying that just because of the amount of the way that the Oasis is treated in the book, it is so huge that it can't be equated as being a Facebook star or an Instagram star.
The reason I kind of say that because if you listen to how society and then they talk about how politics and all that stuff works and it turns into essentially celebrities and stuff are the only ones that can run and win things. Apparently, that's why I say it's like, he posted a nice Facebook post and everybody gave him 500,000.
Yeah, likes. but also again, he also mentioned in that the real election that anybody cared about was the election in the Oasis. Mm-hmm. So
that's I think one of the important points is because we are dealing with, again, it's not post-apocalyptic, but it is a dystopian future. It feels like a lot of what we consider to be the traditional media industry of today has been unseated by the type of culture that is found in the media creation throughout the Oasis. And there's actually a little flavor of what's the name of he did we reviewed Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. And Cory Doctorow has a novel all about like mashup culture. And there were little elements of Ernst Cline's, like when you can see two authors who sort of arrive at very parallel thinking, even though the results are very, very different, there are these little commonalities that they share between those two novels. And here, the creation of media felt very mashup. You could become popular throughout this incarnation of the internet by taking pop culture references and using specific avatars and acting out certain plays or recreating pieces of media. One of the challenges that Parzival has to succeed at is being in a first-person perspective. He has to be the main character in what movie is it? Is it Ferris Bueller? Oh, War Games.
War Games.
Sorry, Matthew Broderick.
No. It's
one is War Games.
One is Holy Grail.
There are two Holy Grail.
Oh, Holy Grail's later.
Holy Grail.
Yeah, one of the first ones that he has to do is he has to do like a first-person recreation. So imagine you were playing a game like Overwatch, a first-person perspective game, but you were thrust into the middle of your favorite 80s teen coming of age adventure film.
Such an amazing idea for a game.
I would love to relive the Goonies, and you have to know that so well that to complete this challenge, when your line of dialogue is up, you have to deliver your line of dialogue, right? As the character that you're.
Or a Telltale game working on it, probably.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, 20 years Telltale.
Yeah, totally. Well, but so I mean, if this is something that passes for an individual challenge within the construct of this treasure hunt, I'm also gleaning from that. The author never really explicitly discusses this throughout the book, but I'm gleaning that there's a lot of media and entertainment that's built on that kind of either referring culture, like pop culture references. Remember when? Do you remember this? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, he does kind of. They actually do mention it a little bit, and that kind of, I believe, he had mentioned that after the hunt started, that basically for the egg, that everything changed in terms of everyone started watching more. There were more channels like that, you know, to different just 80s things, you know, didn't matter because nobody knew what to look for. They just knew what era that he liked. So, you know, people started doing, even when some of the Gunters had channels of their own. They played their own favorite 80s shows and things like that there as well.
We should tell people what Gunters are because they're not about.
Yes, I know. When I said that, I was like,
look at you with your vernacular and your wordplay there. A Gunter is an egg hunter. This is in the novel. These are these people that are questing to try and unravel the mysteries of the Oasis treasure hunt, the Oasis Easter eggs, and he's casually friends with Gunters, but of course, there's also a very insidious corporate side to being a Gunter. Like you can be a hobbyist, or you can be part of just sort of an online, loosely collected militia guild that's trying to unravel this. But there's also innovative online industries, and they have this mega corporate infrastructure because, again, whoever unravels the mysteries of this will inherit a substantial fortune from the creator of the Oasis, while also getting control, master control over this property. So it would be like, you know, someone inventing the internet and then leaving a mystery on the back of the Declaration of Independence, and then you have to break into the White House to unravel it. And if you can, you get to own the internet.
Oh Jesus! Don't give Nicolas Cage ideas.
I mean, like, I would totally watch like a fan edit or just like a reboot of Ready Player One with an aged Nicolas Cage playing Wade Watts. It would be a terrible movie that I would enjoy thoroughly.
I tell you,
it'd be terrible.
I'll tell you, with the Sixers, with IOI, when I was reading this, I pretty much associated them with EA as far as the corporate culture. Okay. Like
no.
Perception of EA.
Don't walk it back. Don't walk it back, Andrew. Bold statement. You draw that line in the sand.
Oh, well, I mean, if you're going there, I took it more like the ISPs, and you know, I've had and Warren knows, he's also experienced this. I've had my love-hate with Comcast in the past. So for me, it was truly an ISP thing. I'm like, yeah.
You know what's funny is that I think you're both right and you're both wrong, because look at what ISPs are doing. They're buying up media companies. It would be feeling like a little corporate lock-in, tie-in. Just
yeah. Just waiting for.
No,
I mean,
what the mouse wants, the mouse gets. Like Warren.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that if somebody wants to get the easiest example, I would say it is, say, like an ISP like AT&T, Comcast, or Verizon trying to buy Facebook. If Facebook was something they could try and buy.
Oh no, I was actually on with Lou. I mean, to me, it would be like if Comcast and Disney had a merger.
That's God have mercy.
That's what IOI would be.
That would start to mark the downfall of our civilization.
And I really feel that that's what Ernest Cline is trying to represent with IOI in like the insane amount.
Probably talks already.
The mouse would create its own army, and you know, the mouse would overtake the world.
So I mean, the depiction of IOI are these like faceless cloned avatar soldiers. So like in the Oasis, you can craft any kind of persona or image for yourself, any kind of vehicle, any kind of mount. Like if you're a World of Warcraft player, you can celebrate a piece of culture, create something totally original. But if you're an employee for IOI, these operatives that are also trying to unravel the mysteries of Halliday, then you all just wear the exact same avatar with like minor differences like name tags, and it's a faceless, soulless entity throughout this internet.
Well, the numbers are different on each. They get like a number, but the numbers are 6 digits.
Exactly.
So I think that's where it comes from, or they end in 6 or something like that. There's a reason why they're called the Sixers. It has something to do with how their numbers are, their user ID numbers are structured.
But ultimately, it's like the most on the nose portrayal of the faceless corporate entity that isn't celebrating this media, isn't celebrating this culture, but is trying to brute force unlock this mystery. And of course, like they're never on the pulse. Whenever someone seems to gain some kind of advantage, or whenever someone seems to progress throughout this challenge, IOI shows up to try and buy out their progress. And that's a very corporate statement, you know, like we can look at energy companies today. You know, Shell invests a ton of money into renewable energy. That's a great headline, but why weren't they developing why weren't they developing energy plans on their own? They just went out and bought a whole bunch of companies once renewable power became more fashionable. Not necessarily
piggyback
great.
off of the person who's already done it for you.
See, and again, no innovation, no contribution. We're just going to buy out the progress made by someone else, and oftentimes that usually means that progress gets halted, that progress gets stunted, because this isn't an entity that's exploring this challenge in good faith. They're just trying to game their way or buy their way through that kind of progress.
One of the ultimate expressions of the dystopian future of this type of corporatism was the existence of corporate indentured servitude.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the most scary concepts to me that I feel like.
I know, dude. We hit you back to back with altered carbon, and like, you know, if you're poor, you get decrepit bodies, and now right again. Like, man, we're really feeding Andrew some heavy reading here, man.
Oh man.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that whole segment as I reread it the second time, and I was like, yeah, man, that is so bad. But I mean, really, I think Ernest Cline is just expanding on what we already have now with credit card debt. As a whole.
That part was trippy, man.
Yeah.
They broke through the man's crib and took him, and he's in debt to the company. It's like, yo, man, just send me the bill collectors, and that's it.
I think
working for you.
But I think that was not just a reference to credit card debt. I think that was more a reference to student loans and how the student loan market. I think that was what he was trying to really ping down.
Well, and also, I mean, in 2011, we were just beginning to get into, we were just clawing our ways out of the housing crisis, and there's a lot of like predatory banking infrastructure. You know, like even just the conversations we're still having today with money lending institutions that will reorder your deposits and your withdrawals to make sure that you'll bounce a check, right? You know, like, then that's going to charge you more fees. You know, that's a predatory practice. You know, I had $100 in my account, and then I wrote $120 worth of checks, but you made sure that I bounced my, I bounced my account before I made it.
You really got to watch out for those, like, the strange thing, people think it's the bigger place. It's those small companies that let you in real easy, have light rules. You're not going to catch this from a Bank of America or some big old place like that. They already make it. They don't need to do that. It's these little small. They might as well be like a cash loaners too. Might as well be They might as well be like a payday loaner place, because that's the ones that do these type of things. That got these gotchas everywhere.
Wells Fargo does this thing that you do your purchases, and then before you know it, they'll kick back the money. And if you're not really paying attention, you spend that money, and then you get an overdraft. They do that a lot. And me and my wife are like, gotta watch these fools. They trying to catch you. Just more money than what you have.
I'll avoid descending this book review podcast into a ton of like banking politics, but that was a very nice cultural change of pace when my wife and I switched over to a credit union. Like, credit union is every dollar that we have in it is basically like owning a share of the credit union. So they have no incentive to have you screw up, you know, on withdrawals and deposits and stuff. So that was a very stark change in behavior from the banking institutions that we had worked with before.
No, it's very true. I think in the book you I like the fact that they touched on it. They didn't go too deep, but you got that sense of, okay, this is exactly And it kind of goes back to that whole world thing you talked about. They touched about the world in different ways. Those were kind of the ways to say, yeah, this world sucks. Besides the crisis with the what do you call it again? With fuel,
the energy crisis
and things like that. Like every time Wade, especially the second time I read it, anytime Wade was out in the open, I was like, you know, I think it's only one time I felt like, okay, yeah, this is cool. Like everywhere else, I was like, yeah, just even when he signed in from a remote location,
Right.
I was like, yeah, just sign in and like lock the door.
Well, I mean, he must have had such bad vitamin D deficiency.
Totally. Oh, I mean,
homie didn't leave his apartment for 6 months.
So, I mean, it's the perpetual joke that because I work in studios, I live in Southern California and I'm woefully vitamin D deficient, which is ridiculous. Like it was 80 degrees out today. I could have.
Look. My wife did some research on that. In order to get your proper amount of vitamin D, you literally have to be outside for a minimum of 5 hours. Who's got time for that unless you're a construction worker?
And then also, I mean, like you have the flip side of that is if you're not properly preparing yourself for that kind of exposure, it's skin cancer time.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
So it is one of the things that, I mean, to your point, E, that's, I think, one of the most successful aspects of the book for me is capturing some of the feeling that I think is effortlessly exhibited in a film like the original Matrix, where within the construct of this artificial reality, you can be insanely powerful, but you're still a fragile little meat bag when you're on the outside, when you're, AFK. So that to me is absolutely one of the most successful aspects of giving us what little knowledge of the real world, the physical world outside of this digital fantasy world. That to me, I think, read really well.
So, of course, I want to ask you guys, when you first read the book, as you're going through, so there's one thing I experienced as I started getting more and more cultural references in. I was hoping, what were the references you were hoping to see that maybe you got or you didn't get? Like, because as you read the book, you start going, please. So I got to a point where I personally wanted to see Voltron. And I did, but it was on the wrong side of things, and I was pissed.
Not even Voltron. All you got was the lions.
Thank you very much. Exactly. But did you start reading at some point? Start going, please, you need to have this in there somewhere. It needs to show up somewhere in the book. What kind of references did you guys have in mind? Quan, I'll start with you since I asked the question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. So this is also going to go because I know Andrew was going to ask something fairly similar to of like what would our like avatars and what would we have chosen to do, and I keep coming back. I was really racking my brain. There are so many phenomenal like 80s films, 80s like mid 80s and late 80s films that I grew up with, like Cloak and Dagger, Flight of the Navigator, Daryl. But I keep coming back to just how in awe of a film like The Last Starfighter, so those types of elements I definitely would have wanted. I would have warned myself, like I want one of those starfighter ships, and Death Blossom is the experimental, just destroy everything within my vicinity kind of weaponry and stuff. And that totally would have been my jam in the Oasis.
Lou?
I didn't really envision anything. It gave us what it gave us, but honestly, I would have liked some Transformers or even GoBots. I mean, seriously, dude, I grew up in the 80s, man. Transformers, GoBots, G.I. Joe, He-Man. What else did we get? Silverhawk.
But you taking it to GoBots, son.
Yeah. I love how Lou says, really, I have nothing. Then he just rattles out like 4. He's like, well, okay, if we're going to talk about it, let's.
And not only does he rattle off a bunch, he's like, Transformers, or at least some other flipping GoBot. As if that's the
GoBots were the cheaper version of the Transformers.
No, but you didn't go to like Robotech or Macross or anything. was
all
with you
that
with
good
Silverhawks,
stuff.
man. You know, like I'm gonna shoot this laser beam out of my shoulder for no good reason, but I'm a Silverhawk. Let's go fly through space in a convertible, son.
Let's go.
Yeah, Andrew, how about you?
We see. For me, it wasn't so much like I wanted them to include this and that. There were plenty of Star Trek references, and that was like a big thing for me. So, but the big thing for me was that they brought in Dungeons of Daggerath, which was a little familiar to me, and I looked it up. And turns out I played that when I was like 4 from a hand-me-down TRS 80 computer. We had a little black and white monitor on it, and being 4 meant that I died within 10 minutes every single time. But I just remember the little heartbeat thumping in that, and like it was great because I had completely forgotten about like what the game was and even the history of the system that it was on before, and it brought that back into my memory again. So that was something I thoroughly enjoyed about the references in this.
Bear Claw said the Thundercats.
Yeah, we got some great ones. Bear's Paw was like Power Rangers. Oh wait, oops, that was 90s, and that's okay because I think this is 2044. So if you were into Power Rangers in 25
It would
years,
work.
you can make a Power Rangers. Stephanie Carlson is all about some Pokemon. Maybe having like a
no Pokemon. I think that was the dumbest cartoon ever made. Pikachu!
No. I would want like a full-on Charizard mount. So that would be my winged.
Oh yes, a full-on Charizard. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
So,
how about you, Warren?
So I guess that leads into me now. This is where it gets interesting because out of most of you guys, I'm more of a 90s kid. So a lot of the 80s references I have to
look up.
I know some of them, or I have to look them up to remember what they were. And I probably didn't see it until it replayed some time in the 90s or something like that. Yeah. So there was a lot of things, a lot of albums and stuff that reference, and I'm like, I don't really remember the 90s. I mean, I remember the 80s like that too much. I was like maybe 6 or 7, or but in the 90s, I remember Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and all New Ghostbusters when all that hit, and I remember when all that stuff hit when it did. I was more into that stuff. So it's like I would have loved to see them reference Nickelodeon, and they really didn't at all. And I was like, I didn't expect them to, because I was like, this is heavily 80s referenced stuff with some things from the 90s getting creeped into it, and it's mostly video game references in a way that they creep a lot of that stuff into it. But I would have loved to see Power Rangers, maybe some Beetleborgs, even though they were corny. It would have been nice to see that. It would have been.
I remember those.
I would have liked to see, even though this is technically an 80s cartoon, but I don't think it made it to America until the 90s. It was the Ronin Warriors. Which would have been cool to see.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Sailor Moon.
I don't, those type of cartoons. I'd love to see some Doug, Rugrats. Like, like those.
I don't know how much of an adventure avatar I'd want to pin on a Rugrat, but
but Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil had some adventures. Like
that's true. That's true.
They had some adventures. And you had Doug, and you had,
my previous comment.
Yeah, Doug, you had Quail Man. He had all those characters. He had Quail Man. He had that agent character. He was like, he had the ill imagination, and he wrote it all in a journal. Like,
and opposite that, I definitely want to do like the Max from MTV Studios, if you remember. These cartoon, or Invader Zim.
Well,
totally rocks and Invader Zim. That would have been good times.
We've got the premise for Ready Player 2.
Right. Well, isn't that one of the things that this book? I mean, so there has been some backlash to this story, and I think in part because of this is an author of a very singular voice with a very specific recollection of his own childhood, and this is his love letter to his favorite aspects of his childhood. So already.
What's the backlash? Sorry, because I know movie backlash. I don't know about book. So
no, so the story has a backlash of. So again, I have to be very sensitive here because I am not a member of this community, and I'm probably going to do a poor job of summing up the reason why there is some ire regarding the story in this author. But one of the things that I've encountered and encountered fairly often in the criticism of this story is this is another celebration of the young white male adventure hero story.
Okay, nonsense.
Let me get through.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna jump in too, but let him finish.
Yeah. Where again, it's the success of this one male individual who also represents some trans or homophobia, and even though there is significant objection from the female character in his mind is another prize to be won, and that this is all caught up in sort of the celebration of an era which was very misogynistic and transphobic and homophobic, the 80s and the 90s, when you go back to watch some of those films like John Hughes movies, and there are these very
I can't stretch anymore, man.
Stereotypes.
We cannot stretch any further than what you're stretching. Like Stretch Armstrong does not have enough stretch. Does not have enough reach for what this is. But if we really want to comment on this, for those of people that don't understand, because they must have been born in the 90s and making this complaint, welcome to every single coming of age movie between 1980 and 1999. That's what every one of them did.
Well, but isn't part of the criticism?
Even the black ones? Okay, yeah. They all did the same thing.
But
they did.
to play the devil's advocate and to try and be fair to the objection or to the backlash of the story, which doesn't really seem to have anything to do with the movie.
They don't count.
But to be fair to that argument, where do we draw the line in terms of cultural evolution in a piece of pop culture which is referencing pieces of pop culture that came from an era that we would call maybe embarrassingly outdated in the way that we view gender and race today?
Did you even bother to read the book to know what the female character is?
That's a major problem I have with a lot of the people.
If you didn't read the book, your opinion is invalid. I'm sorry, it's invalid. Argument done.
See, I think
you don't read the source material to get the actual information, then I don't care what you have to say. It's invalid.
I think one of the problems with some of that argument is a couple of things. Number one, I think with any piece of writing, especially the writing classes I took, I've written a script. When I write anything, I write for myself. That's what I was told and taught, that sometimes you put yourself in that situation because you're bringing personal, flavors and ideas into it. So, I mean, I see Ernest Cline writing himself, and I'm fine with that because that's who you are.
Right, because I will say from my own personal, because I can't sum up this argument as well as someone who feels very passionately and very differently than I do. My failing of this novel and why I feel this is a better play to nostalgia than it is, sort of its own work of art. Like, it's something that I genuinely enjoy, but it fails for me in the respect of that. I mean, what you just mentioned right there. I don't see any malice from Ernst Cline.
No,
and I don't see him trying to make any kind of platform or statement, as opposed to maybe, say, an author like Orson Scott Card, who will give us a beautiful novel in a book like Ender's Game, and then will take the trappings, the privilege of that platform of his success and then go on and aid in waging a culture war between conservatives and liberals. Like, that guy, I think, is a jerk, and it's really difficult to separate the art from the artist, but I can't fault the amazing work that you get in a book like Ender's Game. I don't see where Ernst Cline has risen to that kind of direct confrontation. I mean, he wrote a love letter to his childhood, and I really feel like that's the main criteria by which this should be judged. But it does have moments of that kind of angsty nerd rage. There are a number of women who have been very sensitive to the relationship that he has with the female character Artemis. Where
read the book and understand who Artemis is. Read the book.
A portion of the novel, but this is in the discussion that we have in gender relationships today. Once you get to the section where Artemis is trying to separate herself from Parzival, I can understand some sensitivity to the way that we talk about men and women today. And if a woman is no longer in active consent within a part of this relationship, and she is forthright in her condemning a part of that relationship, you're supposed to back off.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing. But it's not even that. That's the thing. It's not. Whatever argument somebody wants to make on that, it's not that.
It's just donkeys being donkeys.
Because what you have here is literally
that's
is
the
a
clean
young
version.
guy who has fallen in love with someone who he hasn't met, and that happens today in the real world. So let's just call it what it is. The people who fall in love with people they met on Twitter or on Tinder or somewhere else.
Let's open up a girl's Tinder and find that one out.
It's messages. Fall in love with video games.
So exactly, and people who've met on, we've heard of World of Warcraft and how people blossom relationships and things out of that. But the thing is I think it really is stretching certain things. One thing I got from the book was you read Oasis. Truly, the way he described the world is like you could be anything you wanted to be, and truly anything. Especially with his best friend.
And here's the best part about
there
that.
You go.
If they're talking about where that point or wherever that point is, there's no guarantee that Wade even knows Artemis is actually a girl.
Well, and this is actually one of the reasons why the book has been labeled transphobic, is because they do have that conversation where Wade demands to know that she is a female human and has never had like
that. Okay,
it's also 2044.
I don't quite understand how it's transphobic. They had sort of a digital form of transvestitism with
we do today. There are plenty of games where I play as a female character, and in the world,
half of my game avatars are
Ready Player One. Like, technically, if I'm enjoying
Final Fantasy 13.
No, I was going to say Tomb Raider. If I'm enjoying the experience of playing Tomb Raider, aren't I engaging in a flavor of digital transness as related to the book Ready Player One? I'm not.
See,
I'm not
that is just
labeling
too.
it
That
that
is
way.
this is too much. Look, it's very simple. This is the simple aspect of everything else.
Squad, and they went all its morphin time all over this thing. We gotta find some reason to complain about something because damn, we cannot let people be happy.
No, I'm sorry. Look,
anything.
yes,
they're
Wade
idiots
wanted to find out because Wade. This is something that Wade loves. Look. I'm going to put it out clear, and if anybody wants to attack me later on, you can. And I'm not bashing anyone. People like certain things, and it's just the way you are. If Wade was asking that she was trans or she was something else, then he would ask for that. But Wade asked if he was a woman because he fell in love with a woman.
No, but hold on, but before you go there, the question was brought up. You ask a question, I ask a question. In the book. So who's ever complaining is just a straight up idiot. Because they were asking each other that question. Are you a boy? Are you real? He goes, yes. So he flipped the question back onto her. So what are they complaining about?
They have to read the book and not the Cliff Notes for Dummies that they picked up in their stock book. They're picking up their pumpkin spice latte.
See, Lou, that was more exposition and more description in the novel that can fit into one tweet. So
no, you got 280 characters now. I've seen plenty of.
You got 200 and whatever characters now, but yet these people, all they want you to do is simply always they find something to complain about. If you really want to complain about the movie and the book, look at how the movie was made. Now, does the movie really adapt well from the pages? Does it keep the 4 key elements? I say no. And that's just going off of the trailers.
Yeah. But they have to have actually read the book, bother to go through the thing to see the whole thing. So who is this Anna Kasparian again? Is she the one complaining? Why do we still listen to her?
I want to be sensitive to this. Like my cousin actually, when she heard that we were going to be talking about this book, she sent me a link to a woman, Lindsay Ellis, who's had some fairly critical things to say. Again, they're not necessarily points that I agree with, but I'm trying to be respectful because I feel like there's there's a point where it's worth engaging in a conversation, even though I viscerally disagree, and still remaining respectful, because I don't want this to be a book that gets weaponized against media. Like I'm personally very sensitive to the idea of trying to police other people's entertainment.
Yeah.
And to the same point that I would extend the olive branch, like it would be foolish of me to be overly critical of the depictions of masculinity in romance novels, right? I should be mocked if I go on a crusade against someone else's fantasy entertainment.
You didn't see us complaining about 50 Shades of Grey.
Well, you know,
I feel the man that doesn't exist.
I feel that there are always points that no, Warren, actually, that's a beautiful point that you bring up there, because I feel there are always toeholds and there are always levels at which we can contribute to an examination or a critique of media. I can, from the outside, be critical of a book like 50 Shades of Grey because I think it does a very bad job of describing a world and a practice and a kink that is hinged very much on mutual respect and consent. And so I can from the outside say, I don't know that that's the healthiest depiction of that kind of lifestyle. But if that's a book that you very much enjoy and you get into the fantasy of that book, and maybe you even act out part of the fantasy of that book, I would just hope that you do it safer than the characters portrayed in that book perform that kind of relationship. So I then, if I'm allowed to have that kind of a surface critique of a novel that's not for me, this is not a book for me, I also kind of need to be somewhat open to someone from the outside taking a similar approach to media that I am a fan of. But at the end of the day, my critique of a romance novel should weigh very little on the overall community for that novel. And I don't feel the romance novel community should have to adapt to my tastes, because you're never going to sanitize a romance novel to a point where I'm going to be a consumer of it. So from the outside, if there's someone who has a gross misrepresentation of Ready Player One and is overly sensitive to some of the lesser themes of this book, you know, these are elements of the book that don't weigh heavy on the overall storyline or the overall conflict or the overall adventure. At some point, we need to be able to say it's not for you, and that's okay.
Like, I mean, no, I
agree with that, but my problem with their complaining is that if they wouldn't, it's like they're adding something that in the book that is out of context, and they're complaining about something that they don't have the context within the knowledge of the story to complain about. So it's like you're complaining about something, we're telling you, well, it's actually this way, but you're still complaining about it. It's like that defeats itself. Like that's not to me, valid criticism.
I don't disagree with you, Warren. I just don't want us to run straight to saying, well, that's a defeat or that's a loss, because I also think it's a teachable moment. I think it's a teachable moment in that the people who are genuinely upset by some of the themes, the lesser themes in this novel, are very far removed from the era that this novel is celebrating. And so I do feel that it's on us to extend that olive branch and say, like, you can come along for the ride, warts and all. Every time you go back and watch some of those 80s movies and like kids are thrown around the F word and not fuck as if it's this terrible slur insult, you know, there is a modern day cringe associated with what we used to do and what we used to say in the 80s and 90s. And we've grown up since then. I don't think we should sanitize that culture, just as I don't believe we should remove the N-word from Mark Twain novels. You know, like I feel that's a very important thread of history that we need to acknowledge that it was commonplace at the time, and now we think that's ugly, and we've grown up since then. And I think we can rejoin that with the media of our childhood as well, at the same time as we celebrate all of the things that we loved.
No, I do agree with you there. I think my own, I just feel very lost, and honestly, I would say definitely reach out that olive branch. I will support you way behind, because I really just don't have time for that kind of nonsense in general.
I think there's a period of just like There's real points and then there's nonsense.
Exactly.
I want to get to the real points.
Yeah, because my thing here is the one thing
I
I wanted to say was I still haven't heard anything that is worth.
I can actually this is from Lindsay Ellis. These are a series of her tweets. And again, I don't want this to become a brigading topic or anything, like, because this is a woman that I feel is joining the conversation from her perspective in good faith, especially as someone who's sort of a media and pop culture critic
now
in her own right. So
did she read the book?
Yes, she has read the book. So she's bringing up parts of the book specifically. So again, she is joining this conversation in good faith, having read this novel and has found elements of this novel to be upsetting to her. And this is one of the ones that that she's referencing when he starts trying to win her back by trying to get around all the ways that she's blocked him and has outright told him, please stop contacting me. My skin genuinely crawled. The book plays this as beleaguered and relatable, if a bit clueless. Playing up cutesy stalking as relatable or even aspirational is harmful. And that's just one aspect of the book that gave me the willies.
Okay, here's my answer to that. Yes, the book plays it as being relatable, as being, this is Enabong Ete. Enabong broke up with his girlfriend. His girlfriend broke up with me, and I am trying to win her back. Mm-hmm. That's how I took it. But then again, I can see where she's coming from, except he didn't do anything to make it look creepy for the breakup. That is where my thing goes with that.
And so this is exactly where I feel Ernest Cline is being painted with too broad of a brush.
Yeah.
So because I agree with you from the male perspective, having grown up on media very much resembling the hero story of this book, I'm a creature of influence from the culture that I came up in.
Yeah.
From the female perspective, her line saying, please don't contact me in the land of 2018, that's a hard stop moment. You don't go beyond that brick wall. That is defying what parts of this relationship or consent that have been extended, and we have severed all ties. And from Ernst Cline's perspective, we only get to hear Parsifal's voice. We don't get to hear Artemis's inner monologue.
No, one more thing though to add to that. If I'm not mistaken, now everyone correct me here.
Didn't that flip the other way too?
Did she state that until after everything is done? That
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that breaks the arguments.
And because this is written from singularly Cline's perspective as the voice of Parsifal, we also don't get the exposition, the background, or the inner monologue as to why Artemis has decided to try and end contact the way that she has.
Oh no, we do get some of it. We do get some.
You kind of get the idea.
We don't get it until the end of the book. So I mean, this is a very, for me, this becomes a very surface argument. She said no more contacting, and that's a very literalistic, on the nose. Only this one statement matters. In a world of active consent in male-female relationships, you must stop.
No, I know, but I'm saying that if I recall, she said no more contacting until we win, because this is the most important thing. Again, It's like reading the Bible. You gotta hit.
But see, you got it that way.
Because I'm agreeing with you, E. Because what I'm saying is, at the end of the book, we also get additional information as to why Artemis is nervous about pursuing this relationship or having this relationship grow into an away from keyboard relationship. This is what I mean. This is one of the major discrepancies between generations of cultures. For us, we get to the end of this book, I think we get a perfect summation and a perfect understanding of why these characters had their falling out and why they get back together. In the land of someone who's coming up today, this post-millennial or millennial and post-millennial culture, that becomes a hard stopping point.
You see.
But here's the other problem. Here's the other problem.
This is why I disagree with
she didn't mention
her
in the
specifically.
She didn't mention in the fact that they're like 14 or 15 in this.
Yeah,
that's a huge omission.
Yeah, that is very true. But here's the thing again, because I still find it silly, because she clearly states in the book, until this is done. So basically,
but
she's putting
he-
it's not that he did anything creepy.
No,
Like, if he did something that was messed up, I agree. I'm like,
well,
go
but
away.
this is exactly in 2018 culture, and especially with the way that I feel the female perspective has found a much more public platform to air grievances in a way that, like, before you had to be vetted by some other male authority before you could really tell your tale. I mean, look at like the cultures on Reddit, you know, creepy texts or creepy messages or something like that. You know, you can find safe harbor in sharing some of the worst aspects of sort of a creeper or stalker society. From Ernst Cline's perspective, that's a more 80s or 90s noble, heroic, I'm still in this pursuit, I still want to show her that she means or matters to me. But from the female perspective, because we lack Artemis's voice, because we lack Artemis's inner monologue and perspective, and we don't get that final answer as to why she is hesitant to engage.
She was scared of love.
Right,
Well,
but we
That's
don't
the
get that
interpretation.
Get to the end.
Well,
We don't get
No, it's not even at the end. When she called it off, it's because he told her, "I love you."
right.
Remember,
right.
they're in
Yes,
that
yes.
tent.
Yes.
Which, when you text
As
a girl,
soon
I
as
love
he's-
you, and she says, don't contact me, and then you try and contact her again, you're being a creeper.
No.
This client does read a little like kind of
No.
the angry nerd boy.
Andrew, please jump in because
Like-
she is taking this out of
Context, big
on the
time.
worst possible way.
But
because
the
they get-
context requires you to get to the end of the book, and I can understand why someone would be uncomfortable in the middle section of this book. Is basically all I'm saying. But please,
Well,
Andrew.
the way I interpreted that the reason why she ended up breaking off was not even so much like saying that him admitting that he loves her. It's that he admits, from her perspective, he loves her, like
Her avatar.
her avatar, not her. He loves her for the wrong reasons, and so it's not so much that she doesn't want to, like, it seems based off of how it was written, like they still enjoy each other's company and along with that. So it's more along the lines of trying to keep him from falling in love for the wrong reasons. If that
That's the society that's been given to us with this whole video game culture now. Anyway, people fall in love playing video games with each other.
Lou, I need you to be a lot less video game sex phobic. I just can't handle it. I feel like you are problematic in your depiction of video game sex. So, no, I mean it's something that I don't feel like we can properly unravel from our perspectives, because this book was written for us, right? And maybe that's the last idea I can leave off. Like the last bit of understanding that I can still latch onto is this. To me, would be like me having, like, for example, I have a very negative visceral reaction to the first Twilight book. I read it because it was sort of a cultural phenomenon, and I found it to be a terrible example of structure and storytelling. But it's not for me. So how much should my arguments, how much should my ire, how much should my criticism really be weighed against the community of people that really enjoyed that world? And to the same token, I would hope that we could have the flip side of that discussion when a book is made for 80s and 90s, conceivably 80s and 90s guys, because we were probably tapped into this element of culture more than women were of that era. But 80s and 90s kids in general, if that's made for us, can it just be made for us? And at what point do we get to say, you know, like, you can come in and criticize it, but that shouldn't really change the production or the spirit or the analysis of why we've enjoyed it, or we shouldn't have to apologize for enjoying it because of the differences from generation to generation and the differences in culture from different perspectives.
Yeah, I don't mind criticisms on specific things. To me, it's like, if you're gonna have a triggered, you're gonna be triggered on an item, have a solid argument as to why. To me, her argument leaves out a ton of context that answers a ton of her issues or questions to the problem that she was talking about. So I mean, look, he got so mad he dipped off. Now he's just like, you know what?
He hit the giant nope button and he's out.
He's like, nope. He just done today. Oh man.
Well, I mean, I think that can help like move us on though. Oh,
and he's back.
Hey.
We were just talking.
My internet just died. Sorry, I apologize, guys.
No worries. We were just saying like you got so triggered by this discussion that you had to bounce. No, I feel like we can table the rest of that, and I think people who are more into that level of discussion will probably have more in-depth conversations than I think I can properly sum up or properly join. But I think this is the right time. If you haven't read the book and you were thinking about trying to read the book, or I don't know. Basically, what I'm saying is we're getting into the heavier spoiler territory here, just to wrap up our discussion. From Wade's discovery of the first major key to this puzzle. And his becoming a celebrity in this world and becoming a known entity, this renews this visceral race to try and unlock the rest of the mystery and find the final Easter egg from Halliday. And this is where everything gets complicated. This book in 2 acts has a wonderful structure to it, where the beginning and the lead up to the discovery of the first clue feels like its own self-contained story, which then accelerates into this completely different aspect of celebrity, of discussions on wealth, discussions of corporate influence over our infrastructure, and then culminates in an epic cross-reference battle royale of all of our favorite like giant robots and Godzillas and kaiju and monsters and spaceships in a way that like someone must get really excited when capital ships are getting destroyed in EVE Online, or you finally have the Strider battle at the end of Half-Life 2 Episode 2, but on a galactic planetary scale, with hundreds of warriors joining. Again, it ramps from like that simple coming of age story, a boy in a dream, to like galactic slaughter, body counts, Arnold Schwarzenegger style of all these digital constructs going down. That's kind of where I want to start getting back into talking about the story and the merits of the story and the plot of the story. Like, I obviously very much appreciate how this book escalates. Where did you guys feel like, because this is digital and because he does such a good job of setting up like you can be anything and you can have anything and you can make anything, does that pay off for you guys like it did for me when you get to the wrap up, having to guard a whole planet with giant robot creatures and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things the book does well is it tells you, I mean, it plays like a game. You know that certain worlds magic works, then certain worlds science works. So if you're going to a certain world, you have to stack up a certain way, or just be prepared because your magic won't work here, or it could work, or when you come to that final battle, it was not just the matter that it was, different levels and cast systems that you had game-wise in there, but then it was the references and even if I like some of the mechs, I didn't know all of them initially until I read the book, but you can imagine them and you can go like, oh yes, this is just like this that I know, and having it on such a big scale. And even when he described when all the Gunters were coming in, and he said the planet was filled, like, when he got closer to the planet, it was just all wrapped around with ships. It was hard to get into. I mean, I haven't seen, I mean, the closest thing to that would be, even though it's, one of the worst Star Wars movies, Episode 3, the beginning battle sequence of Episode 3, where Anakin and Obi-Wan are coming, and it's just this huge battle in front of the planet. And even that does not compare to what happened
No.
in this.
No.
So
I'd say it's closer to the final act where they arrive at Earth in Mass Effect 3. Like if you guys have played that and then quickly forgot the game after, just the sheer, just mass amount of ships. That was kind of what I visualized.
Throwing shade at the same time. That makes me so happy. But so I mean, when we're getting to this plot in the book, a significant amount of time goes from finding the first key before people start unraveling the next series of clues. So there's this great it would have been a passage of time montage in an 80s film. And I keep coming back to 80s movies because there's also this really wonderful danger and mortality that I don't feel kids movies manage to rise to today. So, IOI gets very aggressive. This corporation gets very aggressive in trying to figure out the next pieces of the clues. And as other players in this world are getting closer to unlocking certain secrets, IOI starts influencing them even more. And when one of the sort of the little mini guild that Parzival has sort of built up around in his circle of friends, at what point is it before the second key is unlocked where IOI kills Dido? I can't remember.
Saito, you mean? No, this
Yeah,
is Saito.
I'm sorry, Saito.
It's after I think they get the second key.
After the second key.
After the second key.
Second key. It was when they go to the planet with the multiple houses.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they stage it to look like a suicide, but we later do get confirmation in the book that this corporation just outright kills a kid. That to me totally felt like a moment from a movie like Cloak and Dagger. You get a little kid who finds a game cartridge that has like top secret spy plane schematics on it that the Russians were trying to capture, and the Russian spies like kill one of his friends, and then they kidnap the kid and throw him in the trunk of a car with the body of his dead friend. I mean, we used to do stuff like that in 80s children movies, like that.
Yeah, and they should come back.
Well, I mean, like there's a part, we have a PG-13 rating now, which is sort of like R light, but a maturity of storytelling like that, I don't feel like we've returned to that era of mortality. I keep looking at movies, like I think the movie that maybe gets me the closest to something like The Incredibles, where Mr. Incredible at one point in the movie has to hide behind the corpse of another superpowered individual to evade capture from a giant robot. That's a little ghastly, but it's not nearly as ghastly as a live action little kid being thrown in the trunk of a car with ostensibly a dead body in it. Mm-hmm. We haven't really captured that, but Ready Player One kind of took me back to that quality of danger, of immediacy and mortality.
They do it a couple times in the book. They do it a couple times in there.
Very
aggressively.
Well, with his aunt in the trailer, because towards the beginning, they threaten him, threaten to kill his aunt and whatnot.
And nobody cared.
And he's and Wade is just whatever.
Nobody cared.
Nobody cared because he didn't care.
He didn't
It's
care.
true. He was more mad about the nice old lady who lived a couple of trailers down.
Well,
he
the thing was,
yes, like Andrew,
the thing
he
was
cared more about the older woman than he did his own family.
But I recall in the book, did they confirm that was his aunt that was in there? Because they didn't when he saw it, all they showed was like body scans. He couldn't see who was actually in there.
She was
yeah, I mean, it's implied.
The aunt doesn't get mentioned again, but they never confirmed.
I'm pretty sure, especially because the aunt never gets mentioned again. That's because
she was there.
Yeah.
No, remember, he didn't care for the aunt once she hawked his computer.
Yeah.
I remember with the Oasis, once people logged in, they just stayed. Even he did when he logged in his what do you call it again?
His apartment.
Yeah, apartment. Van. Yeah,
He
just didn't go anywhere until he had to go somewhere. I mean, like that was just how it was with the Oasis. You just were engulfed in the Oasis itself until you had to do a bathroom break. You had to eat because you needed food, not because you even like steak or anything. It's just that you needed nourishment.
So we get to the final wrap up in this book. Parzival, who is it that Morrow, the co-creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is that sort of old wizened wizard, the sort of timely guide character that enters into the later.
Well, he is that literally. He is that literally.
That's it, exactly.
Literally.
So in real world and in his online construct, but of course, because they've been on the run against this mega corporation that's actively trying to kill them and cover it up as if they're just all these kids committing suicide who used to be celebrities. Weird. We do get to this climactic showdown where Morrow has these like super high tech immersion pods that get you into the Oasis in the best possible way. And there's the last key is determined to be the last part of this puzzle is on a planet, which IOI then captures. They have to infiltrate IOI and hack the mainframe and release this shield so that then swarms of other Gunters can then wage war against IOI. And it culminates in like a mega battle between Parzival in an Ultraman construct versus a Godzilla
Mecha Godzilla
creature with one of it's the Black Lion from Voltron that's standing guard over.
No. So they had the IOI sixes had five lions from Voltron,
five of the lions,
which were decimated quickly because they never got to form Voltron to get together.
That was a good idea.
But we finally get through that swarm, and again, I take it back to there are some authors who seem to write that style of action very well, and for as chaotic and as crazy, because like there are sometimes if you can do anything, sometimes it's not interesting. But I think what Cline has done with all of these references and with all of these throwbacks and how clearly he describes the action of Ultraman fighting Mecha Godzilla is one specific example, but just combat in general. You do get lit up really. I mean, he lights you up really well as an audience member. I found that to be like, a very exciting element of the book in that best way that we've always had those conversations as kids, like which comic book character could beat which other comic book character in a fight, or, Enterprise versus Death Star, or, all of these nerd debates that we constantly have with each other, that the ending of this book is totally fan service to all of those comic book conversations that we had growing up.
It was a shame we didn't get one Enterprise reference. That's a shit.
Well, hey, my favorite reference for their Star Trek reference was when they were talking about his AI, and that was modeled after Max Headroom, and he's like, don't be so funny, or I'll change you to Majel Barrett Roddenberry.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was Will Wheaton who said it was just great. So,
yeah, good times. So of course, again, final spoilers, because this is, inspired by 80s fantasy and science fiction storytelling. We do get to the end. Parzival, through, incredible odds,
we haven't really mentioned the actual main bad guy.
Oh no, we didn't. What's his name?
Sorrento.
Nerlin Sorrento, the most evil name you could get.
Nolan Sorrento, yeah.
Nolan Sorrento.
Cline
nice evil
said
80s
that
thing.
He named Sorrento after Nolan Bushnell, founder of the video game company Atari. Quote, "Not that I think Nolan is a bad guy or anything. It's meant as a subtle tribute."
Okay.
But yeah, so this guy is like the most on the nose depiction of mustache twirling corporate evil that you can find.
I don't know. Before I saw like the movie, when I used to picture him, I had that picture of Donald Trump Jr.
Oh, wow. No, I was going to what's his name?
Bad guy. He just had that look when he was sitting with Little John randomly. And that picture, I ended up posting it up. The picture of him was sitting in Little John randomly at some event, and it's like, why does he look like an evil 80s bad guy?
Oh, so that's funny that you went there. I went Ronnie Cox from RoboCop, the OCP guy.
Oh yeah.
He also plays the police chief in Beverly Hills Cop, but just that scummy corporate, like slicked hair, too cool, totally fine with a body count.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited to see the performance of the actor that they have playing him in the film.
That's who I envisioned because I saw the trailer of him. So
I didn't even realize that he was playing Sorrento until after I read the book. But boy, I'm really excited. I liked his performance in Rogue One, even though I wasn't like a huge fan of the movie overall. But yeah, I like him as an actor. So
the movie was great.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I think Sorrento as a villain was he came off as a classic 80s villain.
Oh
in
yeah.
the book.
Yeah.
But he also served the purpose very well because he did the traditional 80s cockiness, where of like I fully have this on the wraps.
Remember the
take into
meeting?
account that the meeting.
The meeting he had, and it was classic 80s where he's trying to punk a kid. The kid just basically goes like this and tells him to screw off. It's the best. That's what basically Wade told him. It was like, hey, you could do this. And he's like, nah, like, I'm out.
He also has that air of 80s untouchability. Like,
he
that
does.
guy from Lethal Weapon 2, like diplomatic immunity, like I could just kill a bunch of kids. NBD. It's cool. You can't touch me. I'm Hawaii.
That is very true. I mean,
That's true.
I was going to mention this when you mentioned fan service. Besides the end, which was like the massive, just pure fan service, there was a lot of just very poignant fan service as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was the one where he the ship that he used, I think it was the Firefly ship.
Yeah.
But he got it from somebody else because they had tried to attack him and he was like, I'm flying my X-Wing, and like, what the hell were they thinking? He's like, so I just took them out quickly and I took it. And then it was that kind of thing. I was like, yeah, I mean, because I'm one of those people, I never thought the X-Wing was that impressive as a ship. I just don't think it is.
Well, I mean, not against the TIE Defender, obviously.
right.
Yeah, but that description just kind of nailed it. Yeah, I heard that.
So again, because I kind of want to wrap us at 2 hours here, even though I'm really digging this conversation. We do finally get to that climactic finale, massive battle, beautifully executed in all of my favorite 80s and 90s geek debate kinds of ways. And of course, Parzival is the character who rises to the occasion to finally unlock the last piece, where the book essentially wraps as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
Where Holiday comes out and says, here are the keys to the castle, and you are now in control of the Oasis. And oh, by the way, you're super rich now. Have a good life.
And the world still sucks.
It sucks a lot less. Sucks a lot less when you're rich. Because
Sucks a lot less for him.
Theme throughout.
But it's also in-game money for them. I forgot what they called the cash in there. It was like some type of credit to something that's in it. But it's like, because real world money is worthless compared to it or something like that. I forgot.
No, I think it was just that like the most stable.
Yeah,
currency.
stable. Maybe maybe it was stable. Yeah, maybe that was.
Parzival is the one who survives after the big explosion.
Yeah.
Well,
do you know why he survives?
Well, I love that there's this mega like death event throughout the climactic finale, but one of the tokens and prizes he receives from unlocking one of the other challenges is a coin, which is his spare life.
It's not a challenge. It was a true, proper, very, very side quest.
Yeah.
Super side quest where like,
well, it was a MacGuffin. It was like
it has nothing to. I mean, his extra life came from having nothing to do with the game he was technically playing.
Well, he thought it had something to do with the game, but it does, but it doesn't, because him playing Miss Pac-Man and
get a perfect game.
Getting the perfect game gives him that extra coin, which he's like, I don't know what this coin does, but then you see what it does after the explosion.
It's just funny because it's such a Scott Pilgrim versus the World type thing, because they did the exact same thing with the ending, where he got a random one-up out of nowhere in the film.
Wouldn't know, didn't see it.
We should have really mentioned Scott Pilgrim versus the World, because this is essentially them doing that type of film, getting another shot at a possible big box office success because Scott Pilgrim vs. World was, I think, way too meta for people. It was just like when you talk about deep references to gaming and culture, it was really entrenched in there. So if you were not a gamer that played games in the 80s or in the 90s, the movie wouldn't click with you with all the references, and it had there's so much visual references as well too as to what was going on in the film. So it's like if you didn't know how to look for those cues and stuff like that, this film just went what is this goofy shit? It's just Michael Cera being Michael Cera.
Right. Well, and yeah, I think we definitely have. I think we definitely have more fun. General audiences would have more fun with that kind of a story today. There were a couple other things. I forget who I was talking to. Just movies and TV shows like an Arrested Development, I think, fell into that trap too of just being ahead of its time for a single camera sitcom. But now
then because you think about Arrested Development came and I think when did it end? 2007, 2008 or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I know it kept trying to come back, or they kept trying to bounce it around to different networks,
and the weird Netflix
thing, and then it just died, and then
it didn't die. It's coming back for another season,
and then Modern Family comes around, which essentially is a single camera mockumentary. It was the same exact style of shooting, but they just hit it off better. It came off at the right time, so that's the only reason why Arrested Development can come back now. It's because they know it's popular.
Arrested Development taught audiences the language of the mockumentary single camera sitcom in the United States. I mean, obviously we've got other successes in the UK that we've tried to emulate as well. But if you hadn't had that language of absurdity for storytelling with no laugh track, then I don't know that a Modern Family ever could have succeeded. You needed a show to fail well first, and then become a cult classic, become a cult hit, and then you can make the safe play with a studio to make I
could never wrap my head around why they thought that why that show couldn't take off. I was like, I just saw the genius in it early because I thought it was hilarious. The way they were doing things, but maybe it's one of those things. I guess it's maybe you got to understand, right? It's like you got to be, like I said, you got to be trained to understand.
Well,
essentially.
The one thing about Arrested Development over a show like Modern Family is there was more of a storytelling arc. It wasn't like, in a drama or in a science fiction show where a season represents a main story and each episode is a smaller piece of that main story. But you did have to invest a little bit more into Arrested Development than you do with Modern Family.
True.
The effects of one episode play out over the course of the entire show. And if you miss a few of those moments, it's easy to get lost into, wait, why are they doing this? Why is he, who's Anne? Her? Really?
Why is he dressed like a blue man?
Exactly. So just to kind of wrap us up, and unfortunately, this is a part of the conversation I don't know that you can contribute to as much because you've already seen the movie. I'm going to start.
Mute.
Yeah, right. I have the master control. I'm hosting this hangout. I'm going to start because I've already been hearing some really positive responses to the film. I had major concerns about Steven Spielberg later in his life helming a movie which is so referential and so deferential to the most disruptive era of Steven Spielberg's career from when he was a young man. So I had very big concerns there. But my biggest concern with the film, and something that I'll probably need to get over, is compressing this into one movie. There to me was a perfect break point for this to become a two-part film series, where the first unraveling the first key, solving the riddle of the first part of this challenge being film one, and then the whole mega adventure leading into the huge climactic battle is film two. What are some of your guys' thoughts heading into this before we go catch the movie, now that we've in many of our cases, and Andrew, you reading the book for the first time, but revisiting this book, what are you thinking, or what do you hope to see? What do you hope to not see when it comes to translating this story from one medium to another? Andrew, you go first.
I'd say I really hope we get to see a lot of the detailed world, like see some more detailed world building, one outside of the Oasis a little bit, and get some more details on where humanity's at. A little bit more elaborated on than we get in the book. And I mean, one thing I am a little disappointed in, which I can already tell just based off of the trailers, was the fact that they have CGI characters representing the avatars in the Oasis, but it's probably cost prohibitive for them to do live action and then put that live action filming in with all the fantastical things you're going to get in the Oasis. But for me, mainly it's just the world building I'm really excited for.
And Lou, what are you thinking? Translating this into moving images and sound and fury, what are you hoping to see?
I just want to see the main parts of the book be in the movie. Give me a proper adaptation. What do you mean, like some of the main parts? Like I always hold up. Don't do The Walking Dead.
No, I was going to say I was holding up Ender's Game as being one of the worst translations. Because again, if we adapt from one type of one medium to another, obviously there are going to be changes, and in a film you've got to abbreviate a lot. But Ender's Game became this like greatest hits mashup of the book with none of the story arc or any of the heart or any of the characters.
Probably why I didn't like
what are some of those things? What are some of the things that when you say major points, are you talking about like the main conflict points and the mysteries of the Oasis?
Yes, give us that. Give us all the main conflict.
The quest characters.
Like I kind of seen H. I don't like the way they make her look in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going off of trailers. She drives an RV, but in the trailer she looks she's driving a freaking sandwich truck.
Okay.
You couldn't get an RV. I mean, seriously, Breaking Bad gave us an RV.
so that's a deal breaker for you as a sandwich truck.
But those are the little things that kind of take you out when you read a book.
Right.
Because you envision it and then you see it on the screen and you're like, well, damn, I mean, really? This is what you're giving us?
Well, and
you couldn't find an RV?
And for all the attention and the detail that goes into making a film, that's the thing you chose to change.
Really seriously, you couldn't just get an RV?
so
a trailer. I can't. I don't.
He wanted a sandwich.
He just wanted a damn sandwich. Although, like, talking about like a misogynistic film change is like, well, she had an RV, but we really feel the woman needs to be making some sandwiches. Misogyny. Patriarchy strikes again.
That might have been the reason why it changed. That might have been the real reason why that's been changed.
Well, and sorry to wrap us up, Warren. What are some of your thoughts, or at least maybe even some of your concerns when we see an adaptation on this scale?
Okay, so for me, I've gotten obviously some little bit of insider knowledge on what's been going on with the difference between the book and the film and whatnot. What really makes me wonder is because in the trailer, and if you read the book, the first trailer, they essentially show a scene that's basically the ending, or what we perceive it to be. And it seems like they've changed that, so I'm wondering where they're going with that. And I'm afraid they showed that the trailer too, which hopefully they didn't, but I have a feeling they did. Whoever cut the trailers for this episode, they were not very good trailers to describe this film. I feel they improved them, but they were not very good. The taco truck would have been perfect. I just saw someone comment that the taco truck would have been perfect. I'm just excited to see how they build the world, how they include the references, what visual representations. They don't necessarily speak, but they cue in some of the set pieces to make you kind of see some of the references and things like that, and some nostalgia to kind of go along with that. I want to see how they're going to incorporate modern stuff like Overwatch and things that we see in the trailer into this thing. And if they've done that a bit more, who they've added in and who, It'd be interesting to see some of what characters were able to get licensed to get into this thing, because essentially this is like a Super Smash Brothers. It's like they got to they have to get so many licenses, so many people to to throw into this, which I'm pretty sure wasn't the easiest thing to do. Interesting to see what parts they're taking out, and there seems to be some important parts they taking out and replaced it with a story that doesn't exist in the book. So like a part of it doesn't exist in the book, so we'll see where that goes. I'm hoping for it to be a fun movie, an adaptation. I'm going with the idea of the adaptation. I just want it to be fun that still, plays true to the core story, but if, whatever they did to change it to make it work on film, that those changes work well for the film.
That's my big concern always, and something that I'm really hoping to see executed well are some smart decisions to solve the problems of abbreviating some of the story, not just cramming in important points because someone thinks that they're important points. If you have to change things, let's change them. And I'm willing to go on this intellectual exercise of having two different stories called Ready Player One. One that exists through my mind's eye, my interpretation, my visualization of these characters, and another one that doesn't resemble the piece of media that I came to enjoy originally. And I guess that would be one of the last things, just to leave us off, maybe with a hopeful perspective on this. Enabong, if you wouldn't mind, I mean, even just the surface discussion of, did you enjoy your film?
As long as this doesn't turn into Dragon Ball Evolution, we're good.
Or Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Oh God, I don't mention them. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist in my mind. I'm too big of an Avatar fan. Doesn't exist.
I will say, and I said this earlier when we started, since I didn't spoil it, and it's fun listening to you guys, especially since I've seen the movie. I'm like, I was entertained. I was thoroughly entertained watching it. I'm not trying to spoil it. I'm not saying it's bad or good or anything like that, but I really was entertained. And especially how both modern and old video games were incorporated into this, I thought was just fantastic, because it didn't matter what era you came from.
Mm-hmm.
You would just go, oh, okay, yeah, that's my jam. That's my jam. And as I mentioned to you, Andrew, earlier on, is I really would love to see somebody do a video on what characters were in this, because I mean, they took Smash Brothers to the nth degree of saying, we will make sure that you will feel like you felt it was like the Oasis. You felt represented. Right. In your taste, in terms of that aspect of it. But it was really an entertaining ride all the way through. My theater was entertaining. Everyone was laughing, cheering. And it felt like an 80s movie.
Okay. That's actually maybe one of the most winning endorsements that I've heard yet.
Because this didn't screen well, did it, at the Sundance, right?
No, it screened excellently well at South by Southwest. That was the first.
Okay.
Yeah,
it was good. The only problems they had was technical.
Yeah, a lot of people liked it. I'll put it this way: from I think half of my crowd had not read the book, and they enjoyed it. That's them. So it's never me saying that. It's like this, because a lot of people were like, man, I didn't know this was a book, because there's some other people, talking and just mentioning that as well. So I think from that perspective, if you've not read the book, then, it's going to be something that you should, definitely check out.
Well, to the book's perspective, like Juan said, it should have been 2 parts, and the perfect way to end it would have been they find the key to get into chapter 2. Well, the Easter egg 2, you end it there, because
we could end it with the death. That first movie could have ended right there with the death of.
That's a good literal cliffhanger moment.
That'd have been a great cliffhanger.
You see, I disagree with all of you. I've said this before. It should have been 3 seasons on Netflix, 6 episodes, and then you can throw in the grinding in there.
Oh yeah,
all the grind of trying to just figure out how.
It would have been too expensive to do it.
Especially because this was a licensing nightmare.
This is the get down times 10 on the budget.
Oh hell yeah! Oh God, how sad! I mean, like, oh, The Get Down. I love that show so much.
Yeah.
Because also, I mean, one of the things that would have been epic is to see the player recreation of like inhabiting a movie, like doing the War Games movie dialogue-a-thon, you know, like as an episode of TV, you know, like how meta is that watching someone reenact a film in part of the film while streaming Netflix. I mean, like my brain's already like a little sort of infinity symbol twisted on just that idea. I think, yeah, I mean, to your point, E2, about just entertainment, I do believe you're trying to make a tent pole, before we get into the summer season film. It's Steven Spielberg attached to it. There is probably a lot of discussion as to how to broaden. So especially like that Smash Brothers idea, even if it's just modern day video game characters in the background, that makes a ton of sense to draw in people today with characters that they can relate to, who weren't 80s and 90s kids, and still be able to set it 25 years in the future. I think 25 years from now, people will look back on Overwatch just as fondly as I look back on Flight of the Navigator.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's one of those things that if you just look at it from the perspective of just video games, forget whether it's in the book or it's not in the book or whatever the case may be. Because when I read the book, I wanted to see other things that weren't there.
Yeah.
You know, like being described. So I think it's just the same way, you know, even in an adaptation movie, is that, you know, if you already go that this is a world, this is a game where you can be anyone or anything, like the trailer says, then I should be able to see anyone or anything.
You know?
Especially since like the movie is heavily referencing 80s stuff, and the majority of the people that they probably want to appeal to know stuff that a little bit more modern, maybe the earliest they know is 90s stuff. You're gonna need to fill in some of those guys, because you don't have for me, I said, well, I have internet that I can look up something to see to reference what it was. You can't do that in the theater.
Isn't that funny that like Ernst Cline has inadvertently written the 80s or 90s kids version of the Da Vinci Code? Right? You gotta look up like what the hell are they talking about with like this old coin-op game that they're referencing. I guess I'll go look it up on YouTube. Whereas like the first time you read a Dan Brown novel, you're like, wait a minute, is that in The Last Supper? I've got to pull up a photo of The Last Supper like right now.
Especially when he starts talking about the Rush albums, like what the hell is a Rush? What are you doing? I'm just like lost.
Which again, and it's a shame that we didn't have Sam here, because that's like really his.
Oh, Sam, and oh god, yeah, Sam was like, I just want to hear that song.
I just want to hear 2112. I just want to hear 2112. So we should probably start wrapping this up, folks. This is really only part one of our discussion, and we went on for 2 hours.
There's so many things we didn't discuss. I mean,
we've got a lot to talk about, and I really want to get back to some of those individual points where we can get into some of the finer detail in parts of the story. In like what we did with our examination of Altered Carbon was we spent one episode talking about the book and then another episode talking about our experiences viewing the adaptation. So the rest of us are going to join E over the next week in getting to see the film, and then we're going to come back and we'll put up dates and times for when we're going to revisit this conversation and talk about the translation. You know, what were our experiences in watching this story morph into a new form. It's not even its final form, and then we'll go from there. So folks, let's go ahead and wrap this part of it up. Definitely be on the lookout for when we're going to be doing a supplemental episode of the Geek Book Club. But Andrew, what do we have coming up next month? Our book for April.
Yeah, our book for April is quite possibly one of the most British books that I've ever read. Master and Commander. We're going to go historical fiction. Figured to change up our pace a little bit.
Why does it have Russell Crowe on the cover?
So,
say the same thing.
So this is actually the 2003 film Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World is a combination of Master and Commander, the first book of this series, and The Far Side of the World, which is on my shelf back there, which is the 10th book in the series.
They skipped 9 books.
Yep. It worked really well, actually, but I loved the film, and I read this about 15 years ago, and loved it. It's a great nautical adventure adventure story to really read. So, and also Jack Aubrey, the main character is his career is based off of Thomas Cochrane, a real person from the Napoleonic Wars, and it's really makes for really fascinating storytelling. So I'm pretty excited about this.
I want to posit a challenge for us in how we produce our podcasts and our episodes. How would you feel? Because I am tentatively very excited about a new video game property called Sea of Thieves. That when we go to talk about Master and Commander, that we try and do it while sailing a ship in Sea of Thieves.
Who wants to join me? I need a crew.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun. Another fun game too is, except there's less people playing it. Hold Fast, Nations at War.
Okay.
Which is very similar, sort of like Guns of Icarus.
Okay. Let's take that conversation offline because again, I feel there's merit to both, and we can debate that on our own. And Enabong says that he needs some help with his
because I definitely need a crew to man the ship, drop the anchor, and attack other ships in the sea, because literally that's what people do. Once you get online, you're gonna be attacked. You need just to quickly just mention, I joined a crew my first game, and these guys, the game came out I actually had the game before these people did, and they already knew exactly what to do. They were like, "Man, the hatch is there." I was like, "What?"
You got a lot of people that played Assassin's Creed.
I was like, "I'll man the cannon. There's a ship right there."
Tell me what to shoot.
I will shoot the cannon.
What is this on?
It's Xbox and PC.
Xbox and PC. Yeah. So I was thinking that maybe for next month's book, while we're talking about Master and Commander, maybe next month's Geek Book Club can be streamed on Twitch. Just an idea.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
So we'll see if we can maybe spread the love, talking about crazy books, but then also, having our cake and eating it too. So we're gonna wrap this up. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. For the rest of our guests, thank you, Enabong and Lou and Warren, for joining the conversation. Let's start off with Warren. Where can people find you, and what kind of content are you gonna have coming up on your channel next?
Okay, so you guys could find me at bw1.com. That's the website, bwone.com. You can look it up on there. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias that we have to be on as a tech channel, as a tech blogger. So I'm on there, YouTube as well too. We have some reviews coming up. Got a couple of gaming. Actually, I have a gaming keyboard. I did the written review, but I need to finish the video review for it coming up. I have some stuff on the Galaxy S9 that I'll be doing as well too, in the lovely lilac color that I have, that I'm making sure I match shirts every day with, just to keep on point there. Gotta match the lilac, man. And host of other things that'll be coming up soon.
Excellent. And Warren and Lou, I mean, in addition to some of the tech commentary on Board at Work, you guys also host movie and comic discussions on Board.
Not me.
Yes. Enabong, yeah.
Enabong.
Oh, sorry.
Wrong black guy.
You all just look so similar.
Yes, we do. We haven't had one in a while, but we are doing something to commemorate the release of Infinity War. We are watching the Marvel movies in a certain order. And the first show will go live next Monday, because it will actually make it up to 4 weeks. So basically we'll have 4 shows, and we'll go through the order of the Marvel movies, just talking about those movies and things like that.
Are you sticking to the movies, not the TV shows, just the movies?
No, TV shows have nothing to do anymore. They stopped after after the Avengers, so it really doesn't go. But we will be doing that just to kind of recap and get ourselves ready for Infinity War. I will have my non-spoiler review of Ready Player One up tomorrow morning on the channel, you guys can definitely check it out. I'll give you some more details in there. I'll let you guys know how it compares to the book in terms of differences and stuff. So if you want to hear that, that'll be tomorrow morning. I've held my peace long enough. I can't believe I actually did. It's rather painful.
Your Herculean task of holding your tongue.
Yes. But you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as well as our website. It's Bored at Work on those, and this is boredatwork.com for the website itself. In terms of tech, we've got actually stuff. Yeah, I can't mention a few, so I have to say stuff. Yeah, I actually have to steal Warren's line.
You got the new Huawei phone review. Well, not review, hands-on, and then you also got
it's a hands-on review.
What's that new? The Mi, whatever the phone that just
Mi Mix 2S.
There you go. That
nice.
And then on Board Gamers, you have some headphones.
And I've got gameplay of Far Cry 5 there. Lots of it.
Oh, that too.
I need to fire up some Far Cry. I haven't gotten to that yet.
Did you get Far Cry 5?
I'm sitting on it. Like I've got a list of things that I need to catch up on with Newegg too, and I'm woefully behind on getting a couple.
Oh, that game is good. This that whole cult angle, man, just gets me in all the time.
I mean, again, I've been very impressed with the storylines on Far Cry, so I need to kick my own ass and actually get on board that stuff. But I also want to send a huge shout out to the people that were participating with the live chat this episode. We had some great discussion happening in there, even though we weren't always able to directly reference it while we were recording. From Raymond Patrick, Mary P, Bear's Paw, Gansey Tech Nerd. I'm missing a few other names in here. Cheryl, Steph Carlson. Stephanie. Some phenomenal chatters. We definitely appreciate you guys joining the discussion. And that's also the major play on the Geek Book Club. This is an online book club that we hope you can participate with. So, next month, we're going to be taken to Master and Commander. And if you want to join that conversation, we'll have a date and a time posted soon as to when we'll be recording that episode too. And alongside, also be on the lookout for our follow-up episode when we all finally get to see Ready Player One, because Anabong is special. Where you can find a Geek Book Club around the internet, the Geek Book Club on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's, of course, hosted on my YouTube channel, Juan Bagnell. You can find Andrew if you want to harass him directly at Fat Produce. And I, of course, am humbly at SomeGadgetGuy. And folks, we'll catch you next, probably in about a week for the supplemental. And then next month for Master and Commander on the next Geek Book Club. Thanks for watching.